In a crowded courtroom on an ordinary morning, no one expected a quiet single dad, wearing an old Navy jacket and a Medal of Honor over his heart, to become the center of a storm. But when a strict judge demanded he remove the one symbol of sacrifice he had sworn never to take off, the room held its breath. And moments later, when the courtroom doors opened and a Navy admiral walked in, the entire world changed in an instant. If you want to know why and how this single father's courage silenced an entire courtroom, stay with us. This is a story you will remember. Before we begin, we'd love to have you with us on our channel. If stories of kindness, honor, and unexpected miracles speak to your heart, feel welcome to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter of hope. Lucas Bennett had always believed the strongest days began in silence. Not the heavy kind that pressed on a man's shoulders, but the gentle kind, the kind that let him breathe before the world woke up and demanded its pound of flesh. On this particular Tuesday, the sun hadn't yet pushed through the thin layer of mist that drifted over the quiet streets of Coronado. The ocean breeze carried the smell of salt and eucalyptus, a familiar combination that had comforted Lucas through many seasons of rebuilding his life. He stood at the small kitchen counter pouring warm oatmeal into a blue bowl decorated with fading cartoon dolphins. He didn't bother replacing it, even though the dolphins were peeling at the edges. Emma loved this bowl. She said it made her breakfast taste happier. "Daddy," a small voice croaked from behind him. Lucas turned. Emma, 7 years old, and still wrapped in her soft cotton pajamas, rubbed her eyes with both fists. Her hair, a gentle chestnut, inherited from her mother, was a little wild from sleep. "Morning, Em," he said, softening immediately. "Breakfast's ready." She climbed into her chair with a little hop. "Are we on time today?" "We're always on time," he said, placing the bowl in front of her. "Some of us just enjoy the morning more slowly." Emma giggled. "You mean me?" Lucas raised an eyebrow. "I plead the fifth." She didn't understand the reference yet, but she laughed anyway. She always laughed at his jokes, partly because she thought he was funny, mostly because she wanted him to feel like he was doing a good job. Kids noticed more than adults gave them credit for. As Emma ate, Lucas glanced at the framed photo on the shelf above the sink. A younger him stood beside a helicopter, the desert sun behind him, and 4 Marines leaning on each other, dusty, battered, but alive. That picture had been taken an hour after the mission that earned him the Medal of Honor. He didn't display it out of pride. He displayed it because those men deserved to be remembered every time he walked into this kitchen. Every time he breathed, Daddy, Emma asked again, her voice smaller this time. "Will you pick me up after school, as long as the universe doesn't fall apart between now and 3:30, he said. "I'll be right outside that gate." She nodded happily. She never doubted him, not for a moment. By 7:25, they were out the door. Lucas wore his usual attire, old olive green work pants, a simple t-shirt, and a well-worn jacket that still carried faint stitch marks from his Navy days. He didn't like attention, didn't need it. And on most days, people rarely looked at him twice. Emma skipped along the sidewalk beside him, humming a tune she'd learned in music class. Lucas carried her backpack, even though she insisted she was big enough now. It was a ritual he wasn't ready to give up. At the gates of the small elementary school, Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Can you tie my shoelace one more time?" "You know how to do it," he said gently. "I know," she whispered. "But I like when you do it." So he knelt, tied the loop with a practiced tug, then placed his hand on the back of her head and kissed her temple. A tiny moment, but sacred all the same. "Go. Be amazing." She stretched her arms wide, her version of a hug, from 3 steps away, and darted toward her classroom. Lucas watched until she disappeared inside. Then he exhaled. The walk to the Veterans Support Center was only a few blocks away. The building wasn't fancy, 5 rooms, a coffee machine that sputtered like it was 80 years old, and walls filled with pictures of men and women who had worn the uniform. It felt more like a modest home than an office, and that was how the veterans preferred it. As Lucas pushed open the door, the familiar smell of burnt coffee and old carpet greeted him. "Morning." Bennett called Jim Walker, an Army veteran with a beard that could have scared a grizzly. "We saved the good coffee for you. There's no such thing as good coffee in this place." Jim barked a laugh. "Exactly." Lucas spent the next hour sorting paperwork, checking in with the older vets, and helping a recently discharged sailor fill out his disability claim. He worked quietly, efficiently, with a warmth that came as naturally to him as breathing. He didn't draw attention to his Medal of Honor, though it rested beneath his shirt on a thin chain today. He wore it often, not because he wanted recognition, but because he made a promise long ago. To remember, to carry the weight for those who no longer could. The door swung open just after 9:00, and a young sailor stumbled in, barely more than a kid. His uniform was neat, but his eyes were frantic. "Excuse me, is this where the volunteers help with court stuff?" Lucas looked up. "Depends on the court stuff." "My name's Evan Parker," the young man said, breathless. "I got a citation yesterday. Speeding. I know it sounds stupid, but I wasn't just messing around. I was trying to get my buddy to urgent care. He had a reaction to something he ate. I thought the judge would understand, but my hearing is today, and I can't afford the fine. I don't have anyone to go with me. I don't know what to do." Lucas rose from his seat. First he said gently, "Breathe." Evan inhaled shakily. "What courthouse?" Lucas asked. "Downtown," Evan replied. "Room 204, in like 40 minutes. Jim whistled low behind them. "Whitmore's courtroom." Lucas paused. He'd heard the stories. Judge Margaret Whitmore was known for being sharp, rigid, and unforgiving. He turned back to Evan. "I'll go with you." Evan blinked. "Why, I mean, you don't even know me." Lucas shrugged lightly. "You're Navy. That's enough. But I can't pay you." "I have maybe. I said I'll go," Lucas repeated, calm but firm. Relief washed over the young sailor's face so fast he nearly sagged. Lucas grabbed his jacket. Then, almost as an afterthought, but not really, he unbuttoned the top of his shirt, reached inside, and pulled out the Medal of Honor. He clipped it gently onto his uniform jacket, the blue ribbon resting against his chest. Jim watched him quietly, brow raised. "You sure?" he asked. Lucas nodded once. "It's a courthouse," he said softly, "a place where truth matters, and where sacrifice shouldn't be forgotten." He stepped toward the door, sunlight spilling across the medal's gold star. A quiet man heading into a storm he didn't yet see coming. But the storm was already waiting. The San Diego County Courthouse was already pulsing with tension when Lucas Bennett and Evan Parker stepped through its glass doors. A line of people snaked past the metal detector's contractors in reflective vests, young parents juggling toddlers, a few civilians in suits trying to mask their nerves. But there was something different about the energy today, a kind of restless buzz, as if the building itself sensed a storm rolling in. Lucas adjusted the collar of his olive-green uniform jacket. The Medal of Honor rested squarely over his heart, gleaming under the courthouse's fluorescent lights. It caught a few lingering glances from the crowd, curious, respectful, startled, but Lucas paid them no mind. Evan walked half a step behind him, trying his hardest not to stare at the medal himself. "Sir, do you always wear it?" "Not always," Lucas replied, his tone steady. "But today felt like a day where it might matter." Evan swallowed, unsure if he should ask more. Lucas spared him the trouble by offering a ghost of a smile. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm not here to make a scene. I'm just here for the truth." They reached courtroom 204 with 8 minutes to spare. A line of people waited outside the wooden doors, murmuring anxiously. Lucas noticed how many families clutched paperwork to their chests like shields, how many shoulders slumped in defeat before even stepping inside. Even in his years of service, Lucas had seen few places that exposed a person's vulnerabilities the way a courtroom did. A woman in a purple blouse stood clutching a framed photo of a teenage boy, her hand pressed over her heart the moment her eyes drifted to Lucas's medal. Her lips trembled, not with fear, but recognition. She whispered something, maybe a prayer. Lucas lowered his head slightly in acknowledgement. Evan shifted uncomfortably, whispering, "People are staring at you." "They're not staring at me," Lucas corrected gently. "They're staring at the medal. It belonged to more men than just me." Before Evan could respond, the bailiff unlocked the courtroom door and ushered everyone in. The room was larger than Lucas expected, oak paneling, polished benches, and a raised judge's bench adorned with an American flag, a California state flag, and a bronze plaque with the name Hon. Margaret Whitmore engraved in bold serif lettering. Judge Whitmore herself sat behind the bench in a dark green robe posture, straight as a bayonet, her hair pulled back into a flawless bun. She scanned the room the way a hawk surveys a field, searching not for prey, but for disorder. Lucas recognized the type immediately. He had worked under officers like her, rigid, brilliant, unyielding, dangerous in the wrong circumstances. As the room settled, Lucas and Evan took seats 3 rows from the front. Evan fumbled with his citation papers, hands shaking. "Hey," Lucas murmured. "Look at me." Evan lifted his eyes. "You told the truth, and we'll stick to the truth. That's all that matters." Evan nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Then Judge Whitmore's gaze snapped toward Lucas like a compass needle finding north. Her eyes locked onto the Medal of Honor across his chest. And something cold flickered there. Not admiration, not respect. Irritation. Lucas didn't flinch. He simply held her stare calm and steady, as if they were 2 strangers meeting on an empty road. Whitmore picked up her gavel. Court is now in session. The first few cases moved quickly. Expired tags, missed insurance forms, a noise complaint. Whitmore dispensed judgments with the precision of a machine, her voice clipped, crisp, and utterly devoid of softness. Case dismissed. Fine upheld. Next, when she called Evan's name, the young sailor nearly tripped on his way up. Lucas rose beside him. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" she asked, sharply addressing Lucas. "Your Honor. I'm here as a volunteer advocate for Mr. Parker." Lucas replied politely. Her gaze lingered on his uniform. "That is a military uniform," she said. "And that," she pointed with the slightest crook of her finger, "is a Medal of Honor." Lucas nodded once. "Yes, ma'am. This is a civilian courtroom," Whitmore said, voice lowering. "Why are you wearing it here?" The room froze. Even the air seemed to tighten. Lucas answered quietly. "Ma'am, federal law permits Medal of Honor recipients to wear the medal at all formal or ceremonial occasions. I came as a veteran supporting a young sailor in court." "I meant no. That medal Whitmore cut in is ceremonial attire. This is not a ceremony. Remove it." A collective gasp rippled through the benches. The woman with the framed photo pressed it to her chest. A man near the aisle muttered, "She can't be serious." A younger veteran placed his hand over his heart instinctively. Evan stared at Lucas in horror. Lucas exhaled slowly. "Your Honor, with respect, the medal is legally permitted." Whitmore's palm slammed onto the bench. I said, "Remove it." A beat of silence formed, then stretched until it was nearly unbearable. Lucas didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't bristle. He simply spoke the truth. "Ma'am, this medal isn't a decoration to me. It is the memory of men who didn't come home. I promised their families I would honor them. That includes today." Whitmore's eyes flashed, but this time with something harsher than anger. Control. "This is my courtroom," she snapped, "and I will not allow military pageantry to disrupt its neutrality." Lucas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not here to disrupt anything," he said quietly. "I'm here to help this young man." The tension in the room grew thick enough to taste. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably, then hesitated. He was waiting for the command. Whitmore gave it. "Bailiff, confiscate the medal." The room burst into whispers, disbelief, outrage. Hands flew to chests. A few people stood in protest. But Lucas didn't move. He simply closed his eyes for half a second, as if steadying the ghosts that lived inside the medal. Then he opened them again, calm, resolute. "Your Honor," he said softly, "you're making a mistake." Whitmore leaned forward. "No," she hissed. "I'm making a ruling." And in that moment, without knowing it, Judge Margaret Whitmore set into motion a chain of events that would change her life, the court, and the entire room forever. Far beyond anything she imagined. Far beyond anything she could control. The temperature inside courtroom 204 seemed to drop a full 10 degrees. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights felt quieter, as if the building itself held its breath. Judge Margaret Whitmore's command echoed through the walls, sharp, cold, and unmistakably personal. "Bailiff, confiscate the medal." The bailiff, a broad-shouldered man named Harris, froze for a moment. His training told him to obey. His conscience told him something else entirely. His eyes flicked briefly to the gold star resting against Lucas Bennett's chest, then back to the judge. He swallowed hard, visibly uncomfortable. Lucas turned slightly, meeting Harris's gaze. There was no fear in his eyes, no anger, only a quiet plea. "Don't make this worse for yourself than it already is." But Harris had no authority to defy a direct judicial order. He took one hesitant step forward. "Your Honor." Lucas said, his voice steady. "I need to respectfully clarify, confiscating the Medal of Honor is not within the authority of a civilian court. There are federal statutes regarding Whitmore. Cut him off with a slice of her hand. This courtroom is not the place for you to flaunt military decorations," she snapped. "You are disrupting the dignity of these proceedings. Now remove it." Lucas's jaw flexed, just barely, but he didn't raise his voice. "Ma'am, I'm not flaunting anything." "Enough," she barked. A murmur of shock spread through the benches. The woman holding the framed photo of her fallen son clutched it tighter, her knuckles whitening. A middle-aged man with a Vietnam veteran cap stood halfway up as if his body couldn't tolerate sitting through this. "Sit down," Sir Whitmore warned, without looking at him. But the man remained standing. "Ma'am," he said, voice trembling with restrained emotion, "that medal represents more than sit down." He sat, but the damage was done. Every soul present knew something irreversible had shifted. Evan Parker, still standing beside Lucas, felt the blood drain from his face. "Lucas, maybe we should just..." Lucas placed a gentle hand on Evan's arm, steady grounding. "You came here for the truth," he whispered. "Truth doesn't shrink. And neither will I." Then he stepped forward, not toward the judge, but just enough to reclaim the space she was trying to take from him. "Your Honor," he said calmly. "The Medal of Honor is not personal ornamentation. It is recognized under federal law. It is worn at funerals, ceremonies, official functions. This is not a ceremony," Whitmore barked, her voice reverberating off the oak walls. Lucas didn't flinch. "Ma'am," he continued softly for me, "it is also a promise. I wear it so the men we lost that night aren't forgotten. I wear it because you think it makes you special," Whitmore snapped. The courtroom gasped again, louder this time. A wave of disbelief rippled across the benches. Even those who feared courtrooms, who had never served or never known someone who had understood instinctively that this line had been crossed. Lucas's expression didn't change. His voice when it came was almost heartbreakingly gentle. "No, ma'am. I wear it because it reminds me I'm still alive." Silence. Not a breath moved. Not one. Even Whitmore's lips hesitated, but only for a moment before tightening into a thin, rigid line. Then she doubled down. "Bailiff," she said again, "this man is in contempt of court. Confiscate the medal, or I will order him removed." Harris took another reluctant step forward. He looked older in that moment, as if the weight of what he'd been asked to do had aged him by years. "Sir," he whispered to Lucas, "I really don't want to." "It's all right," Lucas said quietly, raising a hand in reassurance. "What happens next isn't your fault." Harris swallowed, then stopped moving entirely when the woman in the purple blouse stood up suddenly. "Judge Whitmore," she called out, voice breaking, "my son died in Fallujah. He served under a corpsman who saved 5 men before a mortar hit him. If someone like that walked into this courtroom wearing that medal, I would fall to my knees to honor him." Whitmore glared at her. "Ma'am, sit down, or you will be removed." But the woman did not sit. Instead, she placed her son's photo on the bench and whispered, "You're humiliating every soldier who ever wore a uniform." Someone in the back muttered, "She's gone too far." Another whispered, "Lord, help her." But Whitmore wasn't listening. Or maybe she was, but power had closed her ears. "Bailiff," she commanded, "do your job." Harris took one more step. Emma Bennett, walking past the open courtroom door with her teacher on the way to a school tour, looked inside at just the wrong moment. Her tiny voice carried over the silent room. Daddy time stopped. Lucas turned, and the look on his face, soft, protective, heartbreaking, was the first crack in every heart in the courtroom. Emma stepped inside, eyes wide with confusion and fear as she saw the bailiff approach her father. "Why is he pointing at you? Did you do something wrong?" Lucas knelt, immediately meeting her at eye level. "No, sweetheart," he whispered. "Daddy didn't do anything wrong." Her lower lip trembled. "But they're yelling at you." His voice stayed warm, steady, a safe harbor in chaos. "Everything is okay. Go with your teacher, honey. I'll see you later." She hesitated, then wrapped her arms around his neck, tight, trembling. Lucas hugged her back gently. The entire courtroom watched, breathless. Whitmore banged her gavel. "Remove the child from the courtroom immediately." It was a tactless command, one that made even her own clerk flinch. Emma pulled away reluctantly, her eyes shining with tears, as her teacher guided her toward the hallway. Lucas stood, and when he turned back toward the judge, his expression had changed. No anger, no defiance, just a deep, unshakable calm that was somehow more powerful than fury itself. "Your Honor," he said softly, "I will not remove this medal. You have misinterpreted the law, the meaning, and the heart behind it." His voice carried through the room with the force of quiet thunder. "And if you continue down this path, you will regret it." It wasn't a threat. It was a prophecy, one that at that very moment was already beginning to unfold. For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed suspended in a kind of stunned paralysis. Soundless, breathless, heavy with tension. No one quite knew how to break. Judge Whitmore sat rigid behind her bench, lips pressed into a thin white line, hands gripping the polished wood as if anchoring herself to authority that felt, perhaps for the first time, fragile. Lucas Bennett stood quietly in the center of that storm, not towering, not defiant, not boastful, just steady, like the kind of man who had learned long ago that true strength never needed to raise its voice. Bailiff Harris hovered uncertainly beside him, torn between orders and conscience. The courtroom watchers, citizens, veterans, parents, strangers, sat with eyes fixed on Lucas, drawn not by the metal alone, but by the stillness with which he bore the confrontation. It was a stillness carved from pain, from loss, from the weight of memory. "Mr. Bennett," Judge Whitmore said, speaking through clenched teeth, "I will not repeat myself again. Remove the Medal of Honor, or this court will take corrective action." Her voice trembled, not with uncertainty but with indignation. She was losing control of the room, and she knew it. Lucas did not lift his chin. He did not flare his nostrils or tighten his fists. His expression remained almost heartbreakingly gentle. "Your Honor," he replied, "I mean no disrespect, but if I handed this medal over as though it were a trinket, I would be betraying the men who died beside me. I can't do that. You are not being asked." Whitmore snapped. "You are being ordered. And I'm telling you," Lucas said softly, "I'm not refusing your authority. I am honoring my promise." Something shifted in the room, something small but seismic. A whisper from the back. "That man is a hero," another voice. "Leave him be judge." Harris looked at Whitmore. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Ma'am, maybe we should reconsider." Whitmore's glare could have cut steel. "Bailiff, if you do not carry out this order, you will be removed from duty." Harris stiffened, shame washing over him. He took another step toward Lucas, each movement weighted like lead. Then a chair scraped loudly. Everyone turned. The woman in the purple blouse, the one clutching her son's framed photograph, stood again. Tears streaked her face, but her posture was tall, unyielding. "My son died in uniform," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "And that man," she pointed at Lucas, "deserves every ounce of respect this country can give him." A middle-aged man rose behind her, then a teenager, then an older woman with a cane. Within seconds, more than half the gallery was on its feet, a mosaic of grief, reverence, and defiance. Even Harris hesitated again, his throat working as he swallowed hard. "Please sit down," Whitmore barked. "This is a courtroom, not a rally." But no one sat. Lucas raised a hand gently toward the gallery, an unspoken plea. "It's all right," he said. "Thank you. But please sit." His humility only deepened their resolve, but slowly, reluctantly, they obeyed him. Not the judge. Whitmore's nostrils flared. "Enough of this circus," she said sharply. She leaned forward, knuckles white. "Mr. Bennett, I am charging you with contempt," Ma'am Lucas interrupted gently. "I will stand here all day if I have to. But I will not give you this medal, not because of pride, but because taking it off now would mean I wear it only when it feels convenient." He looked down at the star resting on his chest. "And that would be a betrayal." A tremor went through the gallery, an emotional collective ripple. Just then, in the hallway, Emma's small voice echoed faintly as her teacher tried to comfort her. Lucas heard it even through the closed doors. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. When he opened them again, his gaze was calm as the horizon. "Your Honor," he said, "I'll accept any consequence you give me. But I will not disrespect the men I served by pretending this medal is just metal and ribbon." Whitmore slammed her gavel so hard the sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "You will not lecture this court," she snapped. "Mr. Bennett, your conduct is inappropriate, disruptive, and frankly self-aggrandizing." A collective gasp. Lucas blinked once, as if absorbing a blow, but he didn't raise his voice. "Ma'am," he said, "if you think I'm proud of this medal, then you don't understand what it costs to earn it." Silence. A deep, echoing silence. Whitmore opened her mouth to retaliate, but Harris suddenly spoke. "Ma'am, respectfully, I can't take it from him." His voice cracked. "My brother died in Kandahar. He never came home. I can't take that medal from a man who kept others alive." Whitmore stared at him, stunned. "Bailiff, I'm sorry," he said simply. It was the first act of quiet rebellion Whitmore had seen in years. Her cheeks flushed with humiliation. She looked at Lucas with an expression that was no longer annoyance, no longer irritation, but full, unrestrained hostility. "If you will not comply," she said coldly, "then I will file a formal complaint with the Department of the Navy regarding your conduct." Lucas's brows knit not in fear, but in disbelief. "A complaint? For wearing the Medal of Honor?" he asked gently. "For your arrogance," she corrected. Lucas inhaled slowly. And then before Whitmore could strike again, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. A sharp gust of air swept through the room. Every head turned. The bailiff at the door straightened like a soldier at attention. Because standing in the doorway, medals glinting on her pristine white uniform posture, tall as an iron mast, eyes burning with fury, held tightly in check, was Rear Admiral Grace Donovan. Her voice was calm, controlled, and resonant with authority that could silence storms. "Judge Whitmore," she said, "I suggest you step away from Mr. Bennett." And for the first time that morning, Whitmore said nothing at all. The moment Rear Admiral Grace Donovan stepped into courtroom 204, the atmosphere shifted so abruptly, it felt physical, like a sudden pressure change, before a storm breaks open the sky. Her white dress uniform gleamed under the fluorescent lights, rows of ribbons aligned with immaculate precision across her chest. Power discipline and moral gravity radiated from her in equal measure. But this chapter did not begin with her. It began 20 minutes earlier in the cramped clerk's office behind the courtroom. David Cho had worked as a court clerk for 7 years. He had seen anger, sorrow, fear, and desperation. But he had never seen anything like what was unfolding through the small window of the courtroom door. After Whitmore ordered the Medal of Honor confiscated, David felt something twist violently inside him, something old, something sacred. He knew that medal. He had memorized its design long before adulthood. His father, a Marine sergeant, kept a photo of one on the mantel beside the family Bible. This, his father used to say, is not won. It is earned with blood and given with tears. When David glimpsed the star on Lucas Bennett's chest, he froze. Not just because it was rare, not just because it was revered, but because he recognized the name. Bennett. His father had spoken of a corpsman named Bennett, soft-spoken, selfless, who had dragged 3 injured Marines across open ground under heavy fire. A medic with hands steady as stone. A man who refused evacuation twice. The story was legend in David's home growing up. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "God," David whispered, "that's him." He tried to swallow, but his throat refused. Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, things were deteriorating fast. Whitmore's voice echoed through the hallways, shouting orders, demanding compliance, pressing an attack that had already crossed a moral line. David clenched his fists. He had spent years trying to believe in the justice system, despite its flaws, despite its wounds. But watching Whitmore attempt to strip the medal from a man who had earned it in the very flames of war made something inside him snap. He reached for his phone. His hands shook. He dialed a number he had promised himself he would call only in an emergency. This, whatever this unfolding disaster was, felt like one. The line clicked. "Master Chief Robinson," a deep voice answered. "Master Chief," David whispered, looking over his shoulder to ensure Whitmore didn't hear him. "You need to listen carefully. Judge Whitmore is... she's trying to confiscate a Medal of Honor." Silence filled the line, sharp and heavy. Then the Master Chief spoke, voice low and dangerous. "His name is Lucas Bennett," David said, barely breathing. "And she's threatening him with contempt for wearing it." Another beat of silence. Then steel. "Give me the courthouse address." David did. "And your judge's full name." He did that too. On the other end of the line, the Master Chief inhaled slowly, like a man preparing for war. "Clerk Cho, he said you did the right thing. Don't interfere any further. Naval Command will take it from here." "Master Chief, what are you going to do?" But the line had already gone dead. David stared at the phone pulse hammering in his ears. He whispered to the empty room, "God help her. She doesn't know what she's done." At Naval Base, Coronado, the Master Chief moved like a thunderbolt through the corridors, issuing rapid commands. The news hit each office like a slap. Officers rose from desks, stunned, furious, some pacing, others swearing under their breath. Word reached the strategy wing, then the chaplain's office, then the legal corps. Phones rang, boots hit tile, meetings stopped mid-sentence, and finally, Rear Admiral Grace Donovan, known for her unwavering spine and her relentless defense of veterans, received a folder marked Urgent Judicial Incident. She pulled it open, and her breath caught. Lucas Bennett, a name she knew, a name etched into her memory like a scar. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with something far more profound: debt. She had been there years ago when the reports came in after the ambush. She had signed the final confirmation of valor that accompanied the Medal of Honor recommendation. She had read every bloody detail, every impossible feat of courage. She had spoken to 2 Marines who insisted their commander lived because of Lucas. And once, years earlier, during a medevac crisis, Lucas Bennett had performed a field intervention that saved the life of one of her own officers. Donovan never forgot acts like that. Now someone, a judge, was humiliating him, threatening him, trying to strip him of the only physical remnant of a night soaked in sacrifice. Donovan stood up so fast, her chair rolled backward. "Prepare the car," she said to her aide. "Now." "Ma'am, should I notify public affairs?" "No," she said sharply. "This isn't politics. This is honor." Her aide swallowed. "Yes, Admiral." Donovan grabbed her cap, squared her shoulders, and strode through the base like a warship cutting through dark water. Officers stepped aside immediately. Some saluted. Some simply stared at her expression. Quiet fury wrapped in discipline. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was the equivalent of rolling thunder. Back at the courthouse, the storm clouds were gathering long before anyone knew they were coming. Lucas stood alone before the bench, the entire room watching emotions wound tight as cables. Whitmore, flustered and angry, rapped her gavel again. "Mr. Bennett, answer me. This court demands compliance." Lucas met her eyes with the gentlest defiance she had ever seen. "Ma'am," he said, "some things in this life are worth standing alone for." Evan swallowed hard, guilt gnawing at him. "Lucas, you're doing this because of me." Lucas didn't look away from Whitmore. "I'm doing this because it's right." Whitmore opened her mouth, but she never finished. Because at that exact moment, every person in the courtroom felt the shift, an invisible tremor like air tightening before a lightning strike. The doors at the back swung open, and Admiral Grace Donovan stepped inside. The silence was instant. Total. Electric. The kind of silence born when power walks into the room with purpose. And with that single step, the fate of everyone present, Judge Whitmore, most of all, began to change forever. Rear Admiral Grace Donovan didn't walk into courtroom 204. She arrived the way a cold front sweeps through a valley, quiet, precise, and powerful enough to alter the atmosphere itself. But before she entered that room, the Navy had already begun to move. 30 minutes earlier, Naval Base Coronado. The Master Chief's voice cut through the operations wing like a blade. Listen up conversations died. Papers stopped rustling. Officers raised their heads. "We have an incident downtown," he announced, holding a printout in one hand. "A superior court judge is attempting to confiscate a Medal of Honor from Corpsman Lucas Bennett." The room erupted. "No, she didn't." "That's illegal. Who would dare?" The Master Chief slammed a hand onto the table. "This is not a debate. Admiral Donovan has been informed." A hush fell. Rear Admiral Grace Donovan wasn't merely respected, she was revered. Fair, relentless, incorruptible. The kind of leader people followed, not out of duty but loyalty. The Master Chief continued, voice low with controlled fury. "Let me be crystal clear. The Medal of Honor isn't just a decoration. It's a promise. It represents sacrifice made in blood. Attempting to force a recipient to remove it in a courtroom is he couldn't finish." His jaw tightened with emotion. Someone whispered, "Does the judge understand what she's touched?" "Not yet," the Master Chief replied grimly. "But she will." He lifted a hand, signaling the staff. "Escort Admiral Donovan to the courthouse, clear her path, and notify Naval Intelligence we may need legal observers." Officers scattered like sparks. Radios crackled. Doors opened and slammed shut. The base became a hive of motion. Donovan emerged from her office moments later, cap tucked under one arm, face carved in a cold mask of purpose. "Admiral," her aide exclaimed, "the car is ready." Donovan nodded and strode across the courtyard, boots striking the pavement with a steady cadence. The aide jogged to keep up. "Ma'am, should Public Affairs prepare a statement?" "The media might." "This is not for the cameras," Donovan said sharply. "This is for the uniform." Her aide stared at her, throat tightening at the conviction in her tone. Because everyone on that base knew Lucas Bennett wasn't just another veteran. He was legend. The kind of legend spoken about quietly with reverence. A medic who bled so others wouldn't. A man who carried men on his back through gunfire. A corpsman who declined evacuation 3 times. A man who lived, but never forgot. Donovan had signed his Medal of Honor papers. She had read the battle reports, the transcripts, the testimonies dripping with awe and grief. She had personally shaken the hands of 3 Marines who told her voices cracking. He covered us. And now, a judge was humiliating him in public. Her chest tightened with an emotion she rarely allowed herself to feel. Anger. Cold, moral, righteous anger. The courthouse exterior. When the Navy vehicles arrived, pedestrians stopped mid-stride. Car doors opened in crisp unison. Officers in dress uniforms stepped out, forming a natural escort. Donovan emerged, last, sliding her cap on with a controlled breath. A police officer standing outside blinked. "Ma'am, Admiral, do you need assistance?" "No," Donovan said. "I am the assistance." She walked inside. Inside courtroom 212. Present moment. Every head turned the instant she stepped through those doors. The white Navy uniform was unmistakable. The gold shoulder boards gleamed. The ribbons glinted under the lights. But it was her expression. Calm, resolute, deadly in its clarity that silenced the room. Even Judge Whitmore flinched. Donovan took exactly 9 steps before coming to a stop at the center aisle, hands clasped behind her back. Posture perfect. "Judge Whitmore," she said, her voice smooth but edged with authority, sharpened over decades. "I am Rear Admiral Grace Donovan, United States Navy." Whitmore recoiled slightly, but recovered quickly. "Admiral, this is highly irregular, this court." "This court," Donovan interrupted, "is attempting an action outside its legal authority." Her tone never rose, but the walls themselves seemed to tighten. Lucas remained perfectly still, eyes lowered in respect, but Evan Parker was trembling. Not from fear, but from awe. Donovan turned her attention to the bailiff. "Officer Harris," he straightened. "Ma'am, I see you have not touched Mr. Bennett's medal." "No, ma'am." "Good," she said softly. "That is the only correct decision that has been made in this room in the last 30 minutes. A ripple of stunned breath swept the gallery. Judge Whitmore slammed her gavel. "Admiral Donovan, you will not undermine the authority of this court. This court undermined itself the moment it attempted to strip a national honor from a combat veteran, Donovan replied, without blinking. Whitmore's voice rose. This is my courtroom. Donovan stepped closer, her presence looming not by size, but by sheer command. Your courtroom, she said quietly, operates within the boundaries of federal law, and the Medal of Honor is protected by that law. Mr. Bennett is in full compliance. Whitmore's face reddened. He is disrupting the court. Donovan's eyes hardened. The only disruption here is the violation of his dignity. Silence again, thicker, heavier. Lucas finally spoke. Admiral, he said softly, it's all right. I don't want trouble. Donovan turned and something rare flickered in her eyes, gentle recognition, almost sorrowful respect. Corman Bennett. She said you did not ask for this, but sometimes trouble finds the people who deserve it least. She faced Whitmore one last time. I am formally requesting an immediate recess. You have no standing. Donovan took one deliberate step forward. The room felt the shift. Judge Whitmore, she said. Voice dropping into a cold, unwavering register. If you continue on this course, this courthouse will find itself answering to the Department of the Navy, the Department of Justice, and half the veterans' organizations in this country by morning. A murmur rippled fear-shock vindication. Whitmore swallowed. Hard. Donovan held her gaze. Stand down, Donovan said. Now, Whitmore's gavel trembled slightly in her hand. And though she said nothing, her silence was answer enough. It was the beginning of the unraveling. And the moment everyone in that courtroom realized this was no longer about a citation, no longer about a medal, no longer even about a judge's authority. This was about honor, and the Navy had come to collect. The courtroom felt different. Now, not calmer, not safer, but charged like the air before lightning strikes. Rear Admiral Grace Donovan's presence had turned every whisper into a held breath, every heartbeat into a countdown. People sat stiffly on the wooden benches, eyes darting between the Admiral Lucas Bennett and the increasingly pale Judge Margaret Whitmore. If there had been a path for Whitmore to retreat gracefully, she might have taken it. But pride is a stubborn commander. She gripped her gavel with white knuckles, as if squeezing the handle harder might restore the authority slipping through her fingers. Admiral Donovan, she began, voice unsteady, but climbing with brittle arrogance. I will not be intimidated in my own courtroom. Your presence here, while noted, is inappropriate and unnecessary. Donovan didn't flinch. What is unnecessary, she replied evenly, is the continued humiliation of a Medal of Honor recipient who has committed no offense. A wave of murmurs swelled. Even the walls seemed to lean closer. Whitmore's jaw tightened. This is my courtroom, she repeated louder this time, as though volume could restore control. I will not allow military interference, Donovan interrupted softly. Interference is attempting to confiscate a federal honor you have no legal authority over. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself, steadying the chaos. Evan Parker stood beside him, shoulders trembling. Whitmore pointed her gavel like a weapon. This man, she said, voice nearing a shout, is in clear contempt. He refuses orders, disrupts proceedings, and incites disorder. Lucas finally lifted his gaze to her, and in that moment, something about him changed. Not his posture, not his expression, but the feeling around him. It was the kind of stillness that came before a soldier made peace with whatever came next. Your Honor, he said quietly, I haven't raised my voice. I haven't disobeyed any lawful instruction. All I've done is stand here. You have refused to comply, Whitmore snapped. With an unlawful directive, Donovan added her tone, slicing through the argument. Whitmore slammed the gavel down. The sound cracked like a rifle shot. The gallery jumped. Harris, the bailiff, flinched. One of the older veterans muttered a curse under his breath. "This is chaos," Whitmore spat. "Absolute chaos, no." Lucas answered softly. "This is people seeing wrong done in front of them." His calmness only infuriated her more. Whitmore rose from her seat, slowly, stiffly, like a figure carved from cold marble. "Mr. Bennett," she said, voice trembling with rage she could no longer mask. "You are ordered by the authority of this court to remove that medal or face immediate arrest." Gasps. Someone whispered, "She's lost her mind." Lucas exhaled, a long, heavy breath. Then he spoke. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I won't." Those 3 words were small, gentle, utterly unshakable. And they broke something in Whitmore. She grabbed the edge of her bench, leaning forward. "You think this courtroom revolves around you," she hissed. "You think your medal grants you immunity?" "You think no," Lucas said. The word was so soft the room shouldn't have heard it. But they did. "Then what gives you the right," she said, "to defy a direct order?" Lucas took a step forward, not aggressive, not challenging, simply present. "Because the men who earned this medal with me," he said, touching the star, reverently, "don't have a voice to stand up for themselves anymore. So I stand for them." A hush rolled across the benches like a tide. Lucas continued. "And because wearing this medal is exactly what federal law allows me to do in a courtroom, I am not defying you. I am honoring them." Whitmore's face twisted, anger, embarrassment, desperation blending into something unstable. "You are twisting this," she shouted. "You're manipulating sentiment, playing to the crowd." "No one's playing to anything," Evan burst out suddenly. "He's telling the truth." Whitmore whipped around. "You be silent, or I will add contempt to your charges." Evan shrank back, visibly shaking. Lucas placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "This isn't his fight," Lucas said. "It's mine, Corpsman Bennett." Whitmore barked, and then the bailiff refused to move. Whitmore gestured sharply toward Lucas. "Bailiff, arrest him." Harris didn't budge. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I can't." "You what?" Whitmore demanded. "Ma'am." "I can't do it," Harris repeated, voice rough. "My brother died in Kandahar. He served under a corpsman too, a man just like him." He nodded toward Lucas. "I won't put my hands on him. I won't disrespect that medal. Not today. Not ever." The courtroom erupted, shock, emotion, disbelief. Whitmore looked around, eyes wild, realizing she was losing the room, losing the bailiff, losing the narrative, losing control. She banged her gavel. "Your dear," but the room no longer responded. The gallery's eyes were not on her anymore. They were on Lucas Bennett. And then the courtroom door swung open again, this time with awat and purposeful movement. A young Marine captain entered first, heels clicking sharply. Behind him, 2 Navy JAG officers, and behind them, the full escort of Admiral Donovan. Whitmore's gavel froze mid-air. Donovan stepped forward until she stood mere feet from the bench, her shadow cutting across the judge's desk. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Judge Whitmore," she said, tone like cold steel wrapped in velvet. "Your conduct violates federal code regarding the Medal of Honor. You will cease this immediately." Whitmore sputtered. You have no standing." To Donovan leaned slightly closer. "Ma'am," she said, "you are moments away from a formal military inquiry." And I assure you, her voice dropped. "You will not enjoy where that leads." Whitmore's lips parted, but no sound came out. Silence swallowed the room, a heavy, reverent, trembling silence. Then Lucas spoke. Not loud, not forceful, simply honest. "Your Honor," he said softly. The law doesn't belong to any one person. It belongs to this country. Whitmore swayed slightly, pride collapsing from within. And in that fragile moment, the room knew something was about to break. Something long overdue. The breaking point had arrived. For a long moment, the world seemed to forget how to breathe. Rear Admiral Grace Donovan stood at the center of courtroom 204, and everything around her, voices, thoughts, even the pulse of the building fell into absolute stillness. It wasn't the kind of silence carried by fear. It was the reverent stillness that descends when something sacred enters a room. Her white uniform gleamed, her posture immaculate, her eyes sharp with a controlled fury that only those who had commanded life and death decisions could wield. She scanned the room, once her gaze cutting across the benches, the veteran standing in the back, the trembling bailiff, the tearful woman clutching her son's photograph, and finally landing on Lucas Bennett. For the briefest of seconds, something softened in her expression. Recognition, respect, a memory that carried weight. Then she turned toward Judge Whitmore, and the softness vanished. Judge Margaret Whitmore. Donovan said, her voice low, steady, and devastating in its authority. You will step away from Corman Bennett. Now. Whitmore recoiled as though struck. Admiral, this is my courtroom. Not when you violate federal law, Donovan replied, still calm. Not when you endanger the honor of a national hero. And not when you attempt to confiscate a Medal of Honor, which is outside your jurisdiction. An audible ripple of emotion spread through the room. People shifted, sat straighter, leaned forward. Donovan continued, her tone precise and controlled like a scalpel. You may be a judge, she said, but even a judge operates under the Constitution, not above it. Whitmore's face burned crimson. I will not be lectured by the Navy. You weren't lectured, Donovan replied. You were warned. The Marine captain beside her stepped forward, posture rigid. Ma'am, Naval JAG is prepared to open an inquiry if necessary, and Navy Legal Affairs added a JAG lieutenant is standing by to notify the Attorney General's office. Whitmore blinked, rapidly, clearly rattled. Her gavel trembled in her hand. But Donovan wasn't finished. She turned fully toward Lucas now. The room held its breath. Corpsman Bennett, she said softly, I offer you my apologies on behalf of every man and woman in uniform for what you've endured here today. Lucas shook his head lightly. Admiral, you don't need to apologize. This isn't the Navy's fault. No, Donovan said quietly. But you are ours. The words landed with force, quiet, emotional, echoing through every heart present. Then, in one fluid, deliberate movement, Rear Admiral Grace Donovan raised her hand in a crisp, perfect salute. Time stopped. People gasped. A woman cried out softly. Evan's breath hitched. Even Harris, stoic, disciplined Harris, covered his mouth with his hand. A 4-star admiral saluting a former corpsman in a civilian courtroom. Lucas froze, stunned, not because he didn't deserve it, but because he never expected it. His throat tightened. His eyes burned. Slowly, reverently, he returned the salute. And in that suspended moment, the courtroom was transformed into something sacred. A memorial, a tribute, a turning point. Whitmore opened her mouth to protest, to object, to recover control, but nothing came. Her voice had deserted her entirely. The woman clutching her son's photograph started sobbing. The Marine in the back stood and saluted, tears in his eyes. Then 2 more people rose. Then 5. Then 10. Within seconds, nearly the whole room was standing hand over heart, or standing at attention, united in an act that transcended the walls of the courthouse, not out of compliance, not out of fear, out of honor, out of gratitude. Whitmore's voice finally returned, small and crackling. This This is irregular. This, as Donovan's gaze snapped toward her. Judge Whitmore. She said today is the most regular thing this courtroom has seen in years. Whitmore staggered back into her chair. Donovan stepped closer, her voice dropping to a quiet, lethal register. You told a man to remove the Medal of Honor, she said. You ordered a bailiff to confiscate it. You shouted at him in front of his child. You accused him of arrogance. Her eyes narrowed. Do you know what arrogance looks like? Judge Whitmore swallowed hard. It looks like believing your authority supersedes sacrifice, silence, pure, perfect silence. And it looks, Donovan continued, like forgetting that the freedom you wield inside this courtroom was paid for by men like him. She turned, sweeping her hand toward Lucas, whose metal glinted quietly in the stillness. Lucas stood motionless, pain and humility intertwined in his eyes, his posture solid, but heavy with memories Donovan knew all too well. Then Donovan faced the room. Her voice softened, filled with a deep moral clarity that vibrated through the benches. The Medal of Honor is not jewelry, she said. It is borrowed courage. Borrowed from the ones who didn't survive long enough to carry it themselves. Her eyes flicked toward the woman with the framed photo. It is the last voice of the fallen, Donovan said. And when a living recipient wears it, we do not ask him to remove it. The woman sobbed harder, clutching her boy's picture. Donovan looked back at Whitmore. We honor him, she said simply. Whitmore sagged in her chair, defeated, shaken, stripped of all illusions of control. Lucas's breathing was shallow now, chest tight. He had never asked for this, never wanted attention or spectacle, but he stood in it anyway, because that was who he was. A quiet hero, a survivor, a man who carried ghosts gently like memories tucked into his soul. At last, Donovan turned toward him fully. Corpsman Bennett, she said, you've stood alone long enough. Her voice cracked on the last word. Just barely. Just enough for him to hear it. Lucas swallowed, eyes glistening. Thank you, Admiral, he whispered, for coming. She nodded once. Where you stand, the Navy stands. And in that powerful, unspoken pledge, the room felt the weight of a nation leaning toward Lucas Bennett, not in pity, but in reverence. The silence in courtroom 204 was not emptiness. It was respect. It was truth. It was the sound of a judge's authority collapsing and a hero's honor being restored. For several long seconds, the courtroom remained suspended in a silence so profound it felt alive. The kind of silence that presses against the walls, against the lungs, against the soul itself. A silence born not of fear, but of revelation. Rear Admiral Grace Donovan lowered her salute with slow, deliberate respect. Lucas Bennett followed, swallowing hard, fighting the tremor in his breath. His eyes glistened, not with pride, but with memory. Heavy, ancient, sacred. Judge Margaret Whitmore sat frozen, her once rigid posture beginning to collapse in on itself. Her hand hovered stiffly above her gavel, but now it trembled so visibly it was almost painful to watch. The courtroom, her courtroom, was no longer hers. Authority had shifted, morality had shifted, and the gallery knew it. Donovan turned toward the Marine captain who accompanied her. Captain Reyes, she said evenly, the file. Reyes stepped forward and handed her a leather-bound folder, the Navy crest embossed in gold on its cover. Donovan held it with both hands, as one might hold a folded flag. Then she faced Judge Whitmore. Your Honor, she said, voice calm, given your actions. I believe this courtroom, and you require a reminder of the law, and of the man you have attempted to humiliate. Whitmore's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Fear flickered in her eyes, not the fear of punishment, but the fear of being exposed. Donovan opened the folder. By federal statute, she began the Medal of Honor may be worn by its recipient, at any time, in any place, including civilian judicial proceedings. Her eyes cold as steel, fixed on Whitmore. Your order was unlawful. The gallery murmured, voices rising with equal measures of anger and vindication. Harris the bailiff exhaled shakily. The woman holding her son's photograph clutched it to her heart, as if anchoring herself to something holy. But Donovan wasn't finished. She turned abruptly toward Lucas. "Corpman Bennett, with your permission." Lucas hesitated, then nodded softly. Donovan stepped into the center of the courtroom, opened the file, and began to read. Her voice shifted, still steady, still controlled, but carrying a resonance that touched every ear, every heart. On the night of September 14th, she began, during a coordinated enemy ambush in the Coast Province, Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class, Lucas James Bennett demonstrated extraordinary bravery in the face of overwhelming fire. A ripple of stillness swept through the room. Evan Parker froze. Harris blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Judge Whitmore's face drained even further of color. Donovan continued. Despite sustaining shrapnel wounds to his left shoulder and thigh, Corpsman Bennett refused evacuation. Lucas looked at the floor. He remembered all of it, and proceeded to drag Corporal Tyler Mayweather 47 yards through open terrain while under sustained enemy fire. A woman in the second row covered her mouth with both hands. Bennett then administered field triage to 3 additional Marines, applying makeshift tourniquets and chest seals using only his remaining gear and his bare hands. Hands tightened over hearts across the room, but Donovan's voice only grew stronger. When the second wave of enemy fighters advanced from the eastern ridge, Bennett shielded a wounded Marine with his own body, sustaining a second blast injury. She paused, inhaled slowly, then read the next line with reverence. According to witness reports, Corpsman Bennett refused medical attention until every member of his platoon was airlifted to safety. Lucas closed his eyes. He remembered the sand, the screams, the weight of Tyler on his back, the unbearable ringing in his ears, and the bitter taste of knowing not all of them made it. Donovan's voice softened, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. His actions directly saved the lives of 4 Marines. A sob broke free from somewhere in the gallery. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his own life above and beyond the call of duty, the President of the United States awarded Corpsman Bennett the Medal of Honor. She closed the folder. The silence that followed was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of reverence, the kind of silence one might find in a chapel at midnight. Donovan looked at Lucas, really looked at him, and in her eyes was no pity, no awe, but a deep, abiding gratitude. "He saved my people," she said quietly, speaking now not as an admiral, but as a human being. 3 of those Marines served under my command. Whispers surged through the room, shock, grief, admiration, all blending into a powerful current of emotion. Judge Whitmore looked as though she'd been struck. Her breath stuttered. Her hand shook so violently the gavel slipped and clattered onto the bench, echoing through the chamber like a judgment of its own. Donovan stepped forward, voice laced with steel. "And you," she said to Whitmore, "demanded this man remove his medal. You threatened him in front of his child. You tried to strip him of the one symbol that carries the weight of lives saved and lives lost." Whitmore's throat bobbed. She tried to speak, tried to form a defense, but shame pressed her into silence. Donovan wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Her words carried the weight of a nation. "This wasn't disrespect," she said. "This was desecration." Lucas shifted, uncomfortable with the attention, but Donovan placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, light, respectful. "You did your duty," she whispered. "Now let me do mine." Whitmore finally managed a sound, a broken, stammered gasp. I "I didn't know." That Donovan said sharply is not an excuse. A judge does not wield power ignorantly. The gallery murmured in agreement. A veteran in the back wiped his eyes. "God bless him," he whispered. Donovan faced the room. "The truth is simple," she said. "This court does not deserve to judge Lucas Bennett today. He judged himself long ago on a battlefield." And he passed. A wave of emotion crashed over the room. Whitmore slumped back in her chair, small, shaken, no longer towering behind a bench, but exposed as a fallible human being. A judge, yes, but one who had forgotten humility. The room waited breathless for what would come next. Donovan gave Whitmore one final look, firm, unflinching. "Your Honor," she said, "the time for denial is over." And with that, Judge Margaret Whitmore broke. Her face crumpled, her shoulders sagged, and at last, quietly, painfully, she whispered, "I was wrong. It wasn't enough. But it was a beginning." And for the first time since the trial began, the courtroom breathed again. When Judge Margaret Whitmore whispered, "I was wrong," the words did not echo through the courtroom. They fell into it, heavy and fragile like glass that might shatter if the air moved too quickly. No one spoke. No one dared to. It wasn't victory. It wasn't vindication. It was a reckoning. Whitmore sat hunched behind the bench, her robe drooping around her like a cloak that no longer fit. Her shoulders trembled with a humbling she had not expected to endure in her lifetime, let alone in her own courtroom. Admiral Grace Donovan watched her with a gaze that was stern but not cruel, disappointed. Yes, but not vengeful. She understood power. She understood ego. She understood how easily a person could forget the cost of freedom when they had never personally paid it. But she also understood atonement. Slowly, Donovan stepped back and stood beside Lucas Bennett, not shielding him, not commanding the room, simply standing with him as equal bearers of a truth larger than any one person. "Judge Whitmore." Donovan said, her voice clear but calm. "The measure of leadership is not perfection. It's the courage to recognize when you've failed." Whitmore's eyes shone with unshed tears. She looked down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Lucas took a single step forward. You could hear the wood creak under his boot. Every eye shifted to him. He didn't glare. He didn't puff his chest. He didn't bask in the judge's shame. Instead, he spoke with a softness that silenced even the beating of hearts. "Your Honor," he said gently. "We all get things wrong." Whitmore lifted her gaze, startled by the gentleness she didn't deserve. Lucas continued. "Courage isn't about never making a mistake. In the Navy, we used to say that courage is standing in the storm, even when it points at you." He paused, taking a breath that trembled at the edges. "And facing the truth," he said softly, "is a storm." Whitmore blinked fast. A tear fell, one she didn't wipe away. Lucas didn't smile, but there was warmth in his eyes. "I'm not angry with you," he said, "and I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm here to help someone who needed me today. The medal, it's not about pride. It's a memory, a promise. It's the weight I chose to carry so others wouldn't be forgotten." He touched the medal lightly. "The men we lost, they wouldn't want anger or revenge. They'd want understanding. They always did." The room was so quiet you could hear the rustle of the flags behind the bench. Whitmore lowered her eyes again this time, not from shame but from reflection, from being seen with mercy she didn't expect. "I don't deserve your kindness," she whispered. Lucas gave a small, sad smile. "We rarely deserve the kindness we need." Donovan's eyes gentled. The woman with the framed photograph sniffed loudly, clutching the picture of her fallen son, as if Lucas's words had wrapped themselves around her heart. Evan Parker wiped his face with his sleeve. "Sir, that was..." Wow, but Lucas wasn't finished. He stepped closer to the bench, slowly, respectfully, every footstep echoing with humility. When I served overseas, he said most of my job wasn't about heroics. It was patching bullet wounds, holding hands, whispering to boys who were scared they wouldn't make it home. His voice tightened. And sometimes, it was quiet conversations with people who had power over life or death. Men who needed to remember what that power meant. He looked directly at Judge Whitmore, not confronting, not accusing. Inviting. "Your Honor," he said softly, "power only matters when you use it to stand on the right side of justice. You still can. That's the part that matters." Whitmore's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with one trembling hand. Then, against all expectations, she stood. Slowly, unsteadily, but willingly. With raw sincerity, she whispered, "Corman Bennett, I'm sorry. For the humiliation, for the misunderstanding. For all of it." Lucas dipped his head. Apology accepted. A wave moved through the gallery, relief, awe, respect. Whitmore swallowed hard. As judge of this court, she announced, voice still shaky, but growing steadier. "With every word, I hereby dismiss all charges against Mr. Evan Parker." Evan gasped, nearly collapsing in relief. Whitmore continued, "Additionally, I withdraw all contempt considerations, and I move to strike from the record every statement I made regarding the Medal of Honor." Her voice cracked again. "Mr. Bennett, I had forgotten what it means to uphold the law with humanity. Thank you for reminding me." The gallery rose to their feet, not in applause, not in chaos, but in a quiet, unified gesture of respect. First the veterans, then the mothers, then the young, then the old. One row after another, rising like a tide of gratitude. Lucas shifted uncomfortably beneath the attention, but Donovan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let them," she whispered. For the first time since the ordeal began, Lucas allowed himself to breathe more fully. Whitmore wiped her eyes and spoke one final time. "This court," she said, "stands corrected." And the weight of those words settled over the room like a cleansing rain. When Lucas walked toward the back of the courtroom, Emma's small figure appeared in the doorway, her teacher behind her. The little girl's face was streaked with dried tears. But when she saw her father standing tall, his medal glinting under the lights, her expression transformed. "Daddy," she cried. Lucas bent down and scooped her into his arms. She buried her face in his shoulder. "Are you okay now?" she whispered. Lucas kissed the top of her head. "I am," he said softly, "because the right thing won today." Behind him, Admiral Donovan met his eyes and nodded slowly. A nod that said, justice didn't just win. Humanity did. The sun had barely risen the next morning when a soft knock echoed through the modest entrance of the Veterans Support Center. Lucas Bennett, wearing his familiar olive green work pants, a simple t-shirt, and the jacket Emma insisted made him look brave, was sweeping the hallway floor when he heard it. He opened the door slowly. Judge Margaret Whitmore stood on the front step. No robe, no gavel, no towering bench. Just a woman, tired, humbled, dressed in a plain navy coat, and holding a folder pressed tightly against her chest, as if she feared it might break apart. Her eyes flicked up to him, and Lucas saw something he hadn't seen the day before. Humanity. "Mr. Bennett," she said softly. "May I come in?" Lucas stepped back. "Yes, ma'am." The judge's heels clicked across the worn linoleum tile. She paused inside the small lobby, looking around at the old photographs on the walls, the scuffed chairs, the stack of coffee-stained paperwork. "This place," she whispered, "means something to people." Lucas nodded. "It keeps them standing." She swallowed. "Yesterday, you kept me standing." He didn't respond. For a moment, she simply stared at the row of pictures, young men and women in crisp uniforms, some smiling, some solemn. Then her voice trembled. "I spent last night reading more about the Medal of Honor," she said quietly. "Not just the law, but the stories, the sacrifices." Her breath wavered, and I realized how blind I've been. Lucas leaned on the counter, listening but not judging. Whitmore opened the folder she carried. Inside were pages, pamphlets, printed articles, handwritten notes, laws, histories, names. Names of heroes. Names of the fallen. "I stayed up until 3 in the morning," she said, wiping the corner of her eye discreetly. "I told myself I was learning. But the truth is, I was grieving for the disrespect I showed, for the arrogance I let conceal my ignorance." Lucas spoke gently. "You came here. That means something, too." She shook her head. "Not nearly enough." Then she exhaled slowly. "But I want to do more." Lucas waited. Whitmore lifted her chin with a steadiness that had returned, not the rigid posture of a judge, but the steadiness of a woman choosing humility. "I am starting a new program," she said. "Mandatory training for all court officials in my district. Education on veteran trauma, military culture, lawful honors, and the emotional weight of service." She paused, searching his eyes. "And I would be honored if you would help me design it." Lucas blinked. "Me?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You. The man who stood in my courtroom with dignity I didn't deserve. The man who reminded me what justice actually looks like." Lucas looked down at his hands, rough from years of service and labor. "I'm not a teacher. I'm a janitor here. A volunteer. A dad." Whitmore stepped closer. "You," she said softly, "are exactly what this country needs to hear." It was the highest compliment she could have offered, and she meant it. Before Lucas could respond, footsteps pattered quickly across the hall. "Emma." She ran out from the back office with a paper in her hand. "Daddy, Daddy." I drew something, for she froze when she saw Whitmore. The judge knelt down, slowly leveling herself with the child's wide, uncertain eyes. "Emma," Whitmore said softly, "I'm the lady who made your daddy's day very hard yesterday." Emma stepped half behind Lucas. Whitmore's voice thickened. "I'm here today because I wanted to tell you. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Your dad is a good man, a great man, and he reminded me of something important." Emma shifted. "What's that?" "That even grown-ups need to learn," Whitmore whispered. Emma studied her a long moment, eyes wise, in a way only children can be. Then she stepped forward, holding out the paper. "It's for you," she said. Whitmore took it gently. The drawing showed 3 stick figures, one tall, with a blue medal, one with a triangle dress, holding a hammer-shaped thing, and one small with brown hair. Above all, 3 were crooked hearts. "It's us," Emma explained proudly. "You were mad yesterday, but today you look nicer." Whitmore pressed the drawing to her chest, as if it were the most precious document she had ever been handed. "Thank you, Emma," she whispered. Lucas placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, then turned to the judge. "If you're serious about the program, I'll help." Whitmore's relief was palpable. "I won't waste the chance." Later that week, the training program began taking shape. Veterans came to speak. Therapists offered insight. Judges and clerks attended with open notebooks, uneasy, but eager. Change had begun, and word spread. Across the courthouse, across the community, across the Navy base. Lucas Bennett, the quiet corpsman, the gentle single dad, had reminded a courtroom what honor looked like. A few days later, on a mild Saturday afternoon, Lucas sat with Emma on their small front porch. She was drawing again, coloring the sunset with sweeping orange strokes. Lucas sipped coffee from a chipped mug, the breeze warm on his skin. The world felt peaceful, gentle, alive. Daddy, Emma asked, not looking up. "Yes, kiddo." She paused her coloring. "Do you regret wearing your medal to court, Lucas smiled softly, gazing out over the yard where sunlight danced across the grass. "No, sweetheart," he said. "I don't." "Why not?" He rested a hand on his knee, thoughtful. "Because some people needed to see it," he said quietly. Emma frowned. "Not you." Lucas shook his head. "I already know what it means. But sometimes, other people need to be reminded." Emma thought on that, then nodded with the certainty of a child who trusted absolutely in her father. A bird fluttered onto the fence, chirping. The sky glowed gold, like a gentle promise whispered through the air. Lucas looked down at his daughter, her small body leaning against his side. A good life, he thought. A quiet life. A new beginning earned through storms he never asked for, but weathered with grace he didn't know he possessed. And as the sun dipped lower, Lucas whispered a final thought into the warm evening air. "Some miracles," he murmured, "come when we least expect them." Emma looked up. "What kind of miracles, Daddy?" He smiled, the kind that remind us we're not alone. And the light lingered soft, steady like honor. Before we close today's story, we'd love to hear from you. Where Are You Watching from our community is filled with wonderful viewers from every corner of the country and even around the world. Feel free to share your state, your city, or just a warm hello in the comments. Your stories and your presence truly brighten this space. And if this story touched your heart, even just for a moment, we warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. Here, we share stories of kindness, courage, hope, and the quiet heroes who remind us what truly matters in life. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful moments like this. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Your viewership, your kindness, and your reflections mean more than you know. Until the next story, may peace, strength, and gentle blessings follow you wherever you go.